The bright morning sun had barely climbed above the city skyline when one ordinary decision changed two lives forever. A luxury wheelchair rolled helplessly toward the edge of a crowded crosswalk after its electronic brakes suddenly failed, while dozens of people froze, pulled out their phones, or simply looked away. In the middle of the chaos, one exhausted single father carrying grocery bags and holding his little daughter's hand dropped everything without thinking about his own safety. He sprinted into traffic, stopping the speeding wheelchair only inches before it rolled into the path of an approaching delivery truck. Neither of them realized that fate had already arranged another meeting later that same day. Neither knew they were both heading toward the same blind date. And neither had any idea that the stranger standing before them would completely rewrite the future they thought had already been decided. If you believe kindness can change someone's life and that everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. Your support helps bring more heartwarming stories like this to people all around the world. Every morning before sunrise, Rowan Mercer woke up to responsibilities that never seemed to end. At 37 years old, he had already lived through enough heartbreak to fill several lifetimes. His wife had passed away 5 years earlier after a long battle with illness, leaving him to raise their 8-year-old daughter, Ivy, completely on his own. Rowan worked long hours as a neighborhood handyman, fixing broken fences, repairing leaking roofs, painting homes, and accepting every small job he could find. His hands were rough from years of hard labor, his boots were worn thin, and sleep had become a luxury instead of a habit. Yet every evening, no matter how tired he felt, he still found enough energy to help Ivy with her homework, braid her hair the best he could, and remind her that tomorrow would always be another chance to smile. Money was always tight. Bills stacked up faster than he could pay them, and there were days when Rowan quietly skipped lunch so Ivy could have her favorite fruit packed inside her school bag. Still, he refused to let bitterness take root inside him. He believed that dignity was measured by kindness rather than wealth, and he hoped his daughter would grow into someone who carried that lesson for the rest of her life. Across the city, Seraphina Vale carried an entirely different kind of burden. As the founder and chief executive of one of the country's fastest-growing technology companies, she had built an empire through relentless determination. Newspapers celebrated her achievements, business magazines admired her leadership, and investors competed for opportunities to work with her. Yet behind every polished photograph was a woman silently carrying deep emotional scars. 2 years earlier, a devastating car accident had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Physical therapy restored some independence, but walking remained impossible. The world still saw a successful CEO. Very few noticed the loneliness that followed her home every evening after board meetings ended and cameras disappeared. Her closest friends insisted that she deserved happiness outside her career. After months of gentle encouragement, Seraphina reluctantly agreed to let one trusted friend arrange a blind date. She almost cancelled several times, convinced that no stranger would ever see beyond the wheelchair. Success attracted admiration, but vulnerability frightened people away. She expected another disappointing evening filled with uncomfortable sympathy and polite smiles. That bright morning, on her way to a charity event before the evening date, everything changed in seconds. A mechanical fault caused her wheelchair to lose control while crossing a busy intersection. People gasped but remained frozen. Before fear completely overwhelmed her, she saw a man running straight toward her without hesitation. Rowan caught the chair with every ounce of strength he had, planting his feet against the pavement until it finally stopped. The truck thundered past only moments later. When everything became still again, Rowan simply asked if she was hurt. He never asked her name. He never recognized her face from magazine covers. He never wondered whether she was wealthy or important. He only checked that she was safe before gathering the groceries that had spilled across the street. Ivy smiled warmly as she handed back a loaf of bread and whispered that everyone deserved help. The little family walked away believing they had simply done the right thing. For the first time in many months, Seraphina found herself unexpectedly emotional. Countless people had offered assistance because of her position or influence. Rowan had helped without knowing anything about her. There had been no cameras, no applause, and no expectation of reward. That quiet act of courage stayed in her thoughts throughout the day. Meanwhile, Rowan's afternoon continued with ordinary struggles. His aging pickup truck refused to start after another repair job, forcing him to push it to a nearby mechanic. He worried about arriving late for the blind date that his older sister had convinced him to accept. Since losing his wife, he had buried every thought of finding love again. He felt guilty whenever someone suggested moving forward, as though happiness would somehow erase precious memories. Yet Ivy had recently drawn a picture of 3 people holding hands beneath a rainbow and quietly admitted she missed having another grown-up around. Her innocent wish softened something inside him. As evening approached, Rowan borrowed a clean shirt from a friend, combed his hair, and nervously arrived at a peaceful restaurant overlooking a small riverside park. He felt completely out of place among the elegant decorations and expensive suits. Part of him considered leaving before anyone noticed. At nearly the same moment, Seraphina entered through another entrance, accompanied only by her driver, who respectfully departed after helping her inside. She expected another awkward introduction. Instead, as their eyes met across the dining room, both of them froze in disbelief. The man who had saved her life that morning stood only a few steps away. The woman Rowan had rescued from the runaway wheelchair smiled with equal surprise. Neither spoke for several seconds because neither expected destiny to work in such extraordinary ways. The evening unfolded with remarkable honesty. Instead of pretending to impress each other, they shared stories filled with imperfections. Rowan spoke openly about raising Ivy alone, the grief that never completely disappeared, and the constant challenge of balancing work and fatherhood. Seraphina admitted that despite her financial success, she often felt invisible beneath public expectations. She confessed that after the accident, many relationships quietly faded because people no longer knew how to treat her. For the first time in years, neither felt judged. Over the following weeks, friendship slowly replaced uncertainty. Rowan never viewed the wheelchair as something defining Seraphina. He admired her resilience, intelligence, and generous heart. She admired his unwavering devotion to Ivy and the quiet strength hidden beneath his humble life. Ivy adored Seraphina almost immediately, especially after discovering that the successful executive secretly loved painting colorful landscapes during weekends. Still, both carried fears that threatened their growing relationship. Rowan worried about fitting into Seraphina's sophisticated world. He imagined boardrooms, wealthy investors, and glamorous events where a handyman would seem painfully out of place. Seraphina feared Rowan would eventually discover the endless pressures surrounding her company and decide the difference between their lives was simply too great. Life tested them sooner than expected. A major financial scandal involving one of Seraphina's senior executives erupted across national news. Although she had done nothing wrong, public criticism spread rapidly. Investors panicked, employees feared layoffs, and reporters surrounded company headquarters searching for dramatic headlines. During those exhausting weeks, Seraphina barely slept. Without seeking attention, Rowan quietly appeared each evening carrying homemade meals prepared with Ivy. Sometimes he repaired broken shelves inside her office after everyone left. Other nights he simply sat nearby while she worked through impossible decisions. He never claimed to understand corporate finance, but he understood what it meant to stand beside someone refusing to give up. His steady presence reminded her that true support rarely arrived wrapped in grand speeches. Often, it looked like someone making coffee at midnight or listening without offering easy answers. Eventually, independent investigators cleared Seraphina of every accusation. The dishonest executive faced legal consequences, while her company slowly regained public trust. Yet the experience permanently changed her understanding of success. She realized that all her achievements meant little compared to having people who loved her without conditions. Months later, Seraphina visited Rowan's modest neighborhood where children played beneath large oak trees. She noticed neighbors greeting him by name, elderly residents thanking him for fixing broken fences without charging them, and families waving warmly as Ivy rode her bicycle through the streets. Wealth had never measured Rowan's value. Character had. Inspired by everything she witnessed, Seraphina quietly established a community foundation supporting single parents struggling to balance work and childcare. She insisted the organization remain anonymous because she wanted generosity to speak louder than recognition. Rowan eventually discovered her involvement only after noticing dozens of local families receiving scholarships, emergency housing assistance, and educational support. One sunny afternoon, Ivy's elementary school organized a family appreciation celebration. Children proudly introduced parents and guardians who inspired them every day. When Ivy stood before the audience, she smiled at Rowan before looking toward Seraphina. She explained that heroes were not people with perfect lives. Heroes were people who kept helping others even while carrying heavy burdens of their own. She said her father had taught her courage, while Seraphina had taught her that strength sometimes rolled on wheels instead of walking. Many parents quietly wiped tears from their eyes. That simple speech became one of the happiest moments either adult had ever experienced. Not long afterward, Rowan planned a picnic beside the same riverside park where their blind date had begun. The morning sunlight reflected across calm water while birds filled the air with gentle songs. Ivy pretended to chase butterflies nearby, secretly giving the two adults a few private moments. Rowan reached into his pocket and held a small ring that had belonged to his late mother. It carried no enormous diamond and no extraordinary price tag. Its true value rested inside generations of love, sacrifice, and family memories. With emotion shining in his eyes, he asked Seraphina whether she would allow him and Ivy to become part of her future forever. Tears streamed freely down Seraphina's face as she accepted. For the first time since her accident, she no longer wondered whether someone could truly love her beyond appearances or circumstances. She already had her answer. Years later, people often admired the remarkable couple without knowing how their story had begun. Some assumed a successful businesswoman had rescued an ordinary man from poverty. Others imagined a wealthy executive had changed a struggling father's life through money. The truth was far more beautiful. A tired single dad had simply refused to ignore a stranger in danger. A determined woman had learned that genuine love never measured a person's worth by status or physical ability. Together they proved that kindness offered without expectation has the power to rewrite destinies in ways no one could ever predict. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad so more people can experience inspiring stories that remind us hope is always alive. Special request: before you leave, comment below with the words, "Kindness always finds its way," if you believe one small act of compassion can change someone's life forever. As the golden afternoon sunlight stretched across the riverside path where their journey had truly begun, Rowan, Seraphina, and Ivy walked forward together, not because life had become perfect, but because they had discovered something even more valuable. Real love is never built on wealth, appearance, or comfort. It grows quietly through sacrifice, compassion, trust, and the courage to help someone when no one else does. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive disguised as ordinary strangers, and sometimes one selfless moment becomes the beginning of a forever that no one could have imagined.